I'd been asked by another hoof care provider to come help them out with a horse that was thin-soled. It was barefoot through the winter, and this horse just needed more protection. It was also pretty sensitive through the center of the frog, so here's what we did to help this horse out over a 3-month period. I like to start by putting the 2 heel screws in the plug first, then I'm able to push down on the plug, have it tight with the shoe, and add my screw at the toe. Because of what we found with the hoof testers, with the really sensitive sole and sensitivity across the frog, I'm making sure there's nothing in this shoe that will be adding any pressure to this horse's foot.
So I'm checking my placement of my cuff on the foot and my marks on my shoe before I weld it.
This is a time-lapse video to show the steps of welding on a cuff to a VersaGrip Lite. I'm using a hold down toggle clamp to hold my cuff in place. I start by heating up my shoe and the first portion of my cuff that I want to weld to the shoe. Once the material goes from opaque to clear and then it starts to turn to a liquid, I'll move to another area. Here you can see it gets shiny. I move back to my shoe to heat that up till it becomes a liquid, and then I'll move back to my cuff and you'll see it turn to a liquid very quickly. Went from shiny to a liquid, now the material is moving. At this point I can compress the 2 materials together, and now I'm able to weld the cuff to the shoe by heating up the surface right at the corner of the V there. As it turns to a liquid, I move my heat gun a little bit further back and roll my shoe onto the cuff. You can see the liquid oozing out as I am compressing the 2 materials together. Once you get comfortable welding a cuff to a shoe, allows you to have multiple options when you show up to the job of what kind of shoe you'd like to be able to put on a horse's foot. Once I get to the end of welding the cuff and shoe together, I release the toggle clamp, compress the 2 materials together, wait for it to cool, and now I just need to grind the bottom surface of the shoe so it has a nice smooth taper on it. Doing this to make sure that there's no dirt that can get between your weld and doesn't have any weak points to it.
So it took us 8 minutes to weld on these cuffs. We have the VersaGrip plugs in here for this horse that's sensitive over the frog and the sole, and let's see how they fit. Here's this one. I like it. I might trim down my cuff just a smidgen, but that's pretty close fit. And then manage my toe just a smidge on both of them and call it good.
I'm using a Dremel to create just a little bit more space down here at the bottom of my cuff so I can move my shoe back and have it a little bit further back on the hoof capsule. The back of the cuff was a tiny bit close to the corner band, so I'm trimming a little bit of this off to have a cleaner fit. Do all the same usual hoof prep for doing an indirect glue. Making sure your foot is clean, dry, and no dust is on it is one of the things that really allows for a successful glue application.
Got a little field paste for antibacterial purposes. I'm going to use some magic cushion to help toughen up the sole during the shoeing cycle. You don't want to do too much, otherwise this can ooze out and interfere with your gluing process, so just the right amount. I have a paper towel here so she can stand on it, level it, and then put my shoe on. Who knew? Super glue and plastic welding would be a way.
The first 3 wraps with the stretch wrap and make sure that there's a bit of tension going over the cuff so it holds it nice and tight against the foot. And then I'll add some compressions after that around the whole foot.
So here we are, Versa grip with stealth cuffs welded on, and the Versa grip plug with field paste and magic cushion underneath.
I have not used my hoof buffer to taper back the cuff to feather it in smooth with the hoof wall, and the reason I've done that is I want to be able to reset these shoes multiple times.
Here we are at 6 weeks. We're gonna pop these shoes off and see what we can learn. So I found that not over trimming my cuff allows me to do resets. It doesn't look as pretty, but it also allows me to come in. I typically start at the heel, and then I go around the top using just a flathead screwdriver, kind of wiggle it back and forth, and then I can do it again. There we go, that cuff's popped off. You don't have to do it on the ground. Some horses, it's safer to have it up on a stand. I find I have a lot of leverage when the foot's on the ground. Good. Here we are. So the first thing we're going to want to do is see how these soles have toughened up in the same areas where she was sensitive before. We don't have quite the same amount of flex in the sole. It's less sensitive. So it's a beginning of an improvement. I'm gonna go ahead and clean up the edges of the shoe, get rid of the sharp edges, and get it ready to glue back on. That good.
So here we are, another 6 weeks later, 3 months in. Go ahead and pull these shoes off. You can see that we have a bunch of hoof wall and the sole is a lot denser. When we use the hoof twisters, you can see that the sole only flexes a minimal amount. Here's what it looked like when we started. The whole sole would collapse when we pinched it. Even though I'm still able to compress the sole a little bit and move it, the sole is still a lot denser than it was when we started. At this point, I was able to give the hoof care provider the tools needed for them to take over from here. I hope this has given you some tools and inspired you to help another horse. Thanks for tuning in. This is Chris Nicholas. If you have any questions, please send me a message. And if you've enjoyed this video, please take the time to like and subscribe. That's all for now. Cheerio.